of our efforts. These websites offer the combatant commanders the ability to get the word out. And I believe, and we, the committee, believe that's important. Therefore, I urge rejection of the amendment and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back.
I would be happy. Can I yield? I yield back. I will yield to the ranking. Excuse me, I didn't see that you were standing.
The gentleman from New Jersey yields to the gentleman from Indiana.
I appreciate the gentleman yielding. I would simply associate myself with his remarks and particularly his introduction. The subcommittee has had concerns and questions about the program in the past, has worked very closely with the Department of Defense. I do think it shows the oversight that the subcommittee continues to exercise and join again with the gentleman in opposition, and thank him for yielding.
I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will just end in saying this is another attempt to cut waste, give the Department of Defense the flexibility to retain our personnel. 2,160 National Guardsmen, to be exact, could be saved and retained by cutting this amount of waste. You know, the Senate, I think, has shown great wisdom in this particular instance to show that they can come together with us and cut the type of waste, as well as having citizens against government waste. I think this is a great opportunity to really show that we support those brave men and women and retain those positions. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This program also supports our very brave men and women. I oppose the gentleman's amendment and yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
Ask for a recorded vote, Mr. Chairman.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments printed in House Report 113-170 on which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. Amendment number 28 by Mr. Cicilline of Rhode Island. Amendment number 29 by Mr. Cohen of Tennessee. Amendment number 30 of Mr. Kaufman of Colorado. Amendment number 33 of Mr. Garamendi of California. Amendment number 35 of Mr. Fleming of Louisiana. Amendment number 36 of Mr. Ridgel of Virginia. Amendment number 41 by Mr. Flores of Texas. Amendment number 44 by Ms. DeLauro of Connecticut. Amendment number 45 by Ms. Lee of California. Amendment number 46 by Mr. Quigley of Illinois. And amendment number 47 by Mr. Denham of California. The chair will reduce 2 minutes, the time for any electronic vote after the first vote in this series.
The House is working its way through amendments to the Defense Department spending.
Printed in House Report 113-170, offered by the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Cicilline, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the nays were prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 28, printed in House Report number 113-170, offered by Mr. Cicilline of Rhode Island.
Recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
That Defense Department spending bill is being considered under a structured rule, allowing debate and votes on 100 of the 180 amendments that were found last week. The Hill writes that members are usually allowed to propose an unlimited number of amendments to spending bills, but House GOP leaders did not want the bill to get bogged down with controversial proposals that would slow down the bill. As a result, Republicans have allowed a total of 4 amendments on the NSA, Syria, and Egypt. And those amendments are expected to come up toward the end of debate, which will continue into tomorrow and possibly Thursday. We spoke with a reporter about what to expect.
And covering debate in the U.S. House on the 2014 defense spending bill, Jeremy Herb with the Hill. What are some of the controversial amendments coming up in the debate?
The biggest fight so far has been over amendments on the National Security Agency's surveillance program. Congressman Justin Amash, a Libertarian Republican, has put forward an amendment that would basically defund the NSA programs if they don't specifically limit information on those who aren't under investigation. His amendment would significantly curtail what the NSA's spying activities currently are, at least what we've learned, and it has been quite controversial. The House Republican leaders basically delayed this bill for a week as they were trying to figure out whether or not they wanted to give Congressman Amash a vote. They decided on Monday that they would allow his amendment to receive a vote.
What about amendments dealing with U.S. aid to Egypt and Syria?
Yeah, those are the other two controversial packages, and I think those are kind of all being left for the end of this bill. There were, I believe, 9 amendments offered that would restrict either military aid or military action in Syria without specific congressional approval. The House is going to vote on one of those amendments later on during the bill. There's also an amendment that would limit aid to Egypt without specific congressional approval. And this is kind of, it's a pushback. The administration has said that it's going to arm the Syrian rebels, provide military aid, that was approved after some delay by the congressional intelligence committees. And this brought it out and required the entire Congress to approve the aid rather than just the intelligence panels.
Does the inclusion of the debate on these amendments, Egypt and Syria and NSA, will that be enough to satisfy the sponsors? Will be enough to secure passage of the entire bill when that happens later this week?
It looks like it will. You know, there was talk from Congressman Amash and some of his Libertarian members that they were going to try, you know, to stop debate, to defeat the rule, and they dropped that after they got votes on their amendments. It's going to be interesting because this is really the first time that we're seeing Congress weigh in on the NSA spying programs since they were revealed in the Guardian stories 2 months ago.
On the NSA amendment in particular, where are Democrats?
That is the question. Steny Hoyer wouldn't say kind of his thoughts on it when he was asked about it on Tuesday. You have liberal Democrats who are joining with the Libertarian Republicans in opposition to this, but some of the more moderate Democrats, particularly, you know, members of the Armed Services Committee, the Intelligence Committee, you know, they're still weighing. There was a briefing today, there was a briefing on Tuesday that with General Alexander, the director of the NSA, so he could address their questions on the NSA's program.
The administration has issued a veto threat. What's their objection? And secondly, how does the spending level for this bill this year, 2014, compare with years past?
Yeah, this bill is it authorizes about $600 billion in defense spending, including the base Pentagon budget and also the overseas contingency operations for the war in Afghanistan. It's below last year's levels, but it is above the pre-sequester levels of spending that have been, you know, set in the Budget Control Act of 2011. The veto threat is over that in that the House Budget Committee has approved a budget that cuts discretionary spending down to sequester levels. It doesn't do it for defense, it does it for all the other agencies, and the administration objects to that approach. You know, I think the bill is going to pass, and it doesn't seem like the veto threat would be followed through on, but it's certainly going to be the fight over the appropriations bills going forward.
Where's the Senate bill, defense bill, stand right now?
The Senate Defense Appropriations Committee has not yet marked up their bill. They're expected to do that later this month, and then it's a question of when that goes to the floor, which is still to be determined.
Jeremy Herb writes for The Hill, covering defense debate, defense spending bill debate in the House, and you can follow his writing at thehill.com. Thanks for that update.
Thank you.
Defense Daily wrote about some of the amendments the Chamber worked on earlier today. A couple of them, the House approved by voice vote an amendment from Texas Democrat Sheila Jackson Lee to move $10 million from defense-wide procurement to defense health research funding. And another, banning the use of funds in the bill for canceling or modifying the avionics modernization program record for the C-130 aircraft. The overall bill proposes $512.5 billion in base military spending. That's $3.4 billion less than the Obama administration is requesting. Here's some of the debate from earlier.
Madam Chairman, the subcommittee has produced this bill after months of bipartisan cooperation, months of hearings, and months of classified briefings. And we present a bill today that is $512 billion, $3.4 billion below the CBO estimate of the President's request, and approximately $28.1 billion above the estimated fiscal year 2013 sequestration level. For overseas contingency operations, OCO, the bill includes $85.8 billion, which is $1.5 billion below last year's level. We have worked closely with all parties. Mr. Visklowski has been involved in every step of the way on producing this legislation. Our committee staff is unequaled anywhere in this Congress, and they have done a tremendous job for the subcommittee. So just some highlights of the bill. There's $580 million to fully fund the authorized military pay raise, $36 million to fully fund the anticipated fuel costs, $950 million to fully fund the 2nd Virginia-class submarine, $922 million to restore facility sustainment, modernization, and restoration funding, and $692 million for military medical research, including $246 million for cancer research and $125 million for traumatic brain injury. During the next couple of days, we are going to consider 100 amendments. So everybody be prepared. It's going to be a long day and a long night. And so, Madam Chair, to get us started off on the right track, I'm going to reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Indiana.
Madam Chair, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
I would like to begin by expressing my appreciation to Chairman Young and to congratulate him on the bipartisan and transparent manner in which he has crafted the fiscal year 2014 defense bill. I also want to express my gratitude to Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Lowy, and all of the members of the Defense Subcommittee for their efforts. We would not be here today but for their outstanding effort. Would also note that this will be the last defense appropriation bill we bring to the floor with the membership of Mr. Bonner from Alabama. With his leaving this institution, we are losing a very serious and thoughtful member who has worked assiduously every day to leave the world better, and certainly want to recognize his individual contribution. The bill also could not have been written without the dedication, hard work, and sound judgment of the staff that Mr. Young has already referenced. I do want to thank Tom McLemore, Sherry Young, Tim Prince, Jennifer Miller, Walter Hearn, Paul Terry, B.G. Wright, Brooke Boyer, Ann Reese, Andrea Ramsey, Megan Rosenbush, Maureen Holohan, Paul Jola, Rebecca Legere, Kent Clark, Michael Rigney, and Joe DeVoe. The bill at hand is fundamentally aimed at restoring readiness and training for the services, two areas that have suffered greatly in the budgetary upset of the current year. While Chairman Young has noted that the bill's $212 billion in funding is approximately $28 billion more than in fiscal year 2013 post-sequestration, it does contain a number of significant reductions. The bill cuts $617.8 million from the Joint Strike Fighter program to address unjustified cost growth and unjustified concurrency estimates for the program. It cuts another $112 million due to an overstatement of Army travel requirement. The bill rescinds $443 million for C-27J aircraft. The bill and report contain a significant amount of language and robust funding for initiatives to respond to sexual assault in the armed services. Sexual assault in any circumstance is unacceptable and maddening. The fact that it is prevalent Within the military is even more so because of the standard to which our men and women in uniform hold themselves. These are individuals who are committed to give their last full measure of devotion to our nation, who in order to be effective need to unconditionally trust each other. Sexual assault undermines all of this. Though I strongly support the efforts contained in this bill, they are aimed mainly at offender accountability and caring for victims. Even though the comprehensive solution to this issue lies outside the services, it is imperative that the proper attitudes and training start during the recruitment process for the officers and enlisted and continue throughout each service member's career. I would also note that the bill includes $20 million above the request for suicide prevention and outreach consistent with the funding level of the past 2 years. Suicides are another disheartening problem within the services, especially given the emphasis that the Department and Congress have placed on the issue over the past few years. But money is not the only solution. We need to spend the appropriated dollars as wisely and effectively as possible. I was taken aback in a hearing earlier this year to learn that the Navy has a collection of 123 programs aimed at addressing suicide and resiliency. While I'm sure that each one of these programs is well-intentioned, the sheer number spreads resources too thin and creates confusion. To their credit, the Navy is in the process of implementing task force recommendations to dedicate more resources to the programs that truly work. Additionally, I would like to express my support for a solution that benefits all future users of the Integrated Electronic Health Record Program. I am proud of the efforts of our subcommittee and the Military Construction and Veterans Affairs Subcommittee to effectuate this long-awaited improvement to medical care for our still serving military members and our veterans. Additionally, the cooperation between our subcommittees and with our corresponding authorization committees demonstrates the importance Congress places on the issue. I am pleased that the bill report contains provisions that enhance oversight at the Department. The Office of the Inspector General is funded at $347 million, which is nearly $35 million above the administration's request. This office plays a vital role in moving the Department towards audible financial statements, which are long overdue and which I attach a great importance to. Also, while the committee increased funding relative to the budget request for environmental cleanup at formerly used defense sites, this increase is accompanied by additional reporting requirements. In the same vein as my prior comments, the money in this program must be spent more effectively going forward to ensure that we complete cleanup projects, not just continue them. Regarding missile defense, the bill increases advanced procurement funding for additional ground-based interceptors. This funding is accompanied by a requirement to document the adequacy of the testing plan for the ground-based interceptors. In light of the program's recent test failure, I continue to be very concerned about the concurrency of this program. I believe it is essential to maintain rigorous standards to ensure that the weapons we pursue are fully developed before we begin fielding them, and once fielded, that these weapons effectively perform their missions. Further, we should review to determine the cause of the latest test failure and understand that if this program needs to be changed, we should reevaluate our position in conference. While I support the bill, there are a few provisions that I have concerns with. In particular, the 3 general provisions regarding detainees at Guantanamo Bay. I believe that the continued operation of Guantanamo Bay reduces our nation's credibility and weakens our national security by providing terrorist organizations with recruitment material. I do regret that this bill and other relevant appropriation bills continue to thwart any attempts to close Guantanamo by prohibiting viable alternatives. Further, I am concerned that the bill essentially prohibits a pay raise for civilian employees at the Department of Defense. We rely on the Department of Defense civilians working side by side with our military personnel to provide medical care for our troops, to perform vital logistics, maintenance and acquisition services, and to provide many other essential services within the Department. Even a modest raise that maintains pay equity between civilian and military personnel sends a critical message of support to these employees. And looking ahead, I am concerned that if the shadows of the future remain unaltered, we will experience serious problems ensuring the continued defense of our nation. As Todd Harrison at the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments has noted, rather than getting larger and more expensive over the past decade, the military has simply grown more expensive. This reality makes our future choices even more difficult, and it is imperative that Congress joins with the Department in working through these decisions at arm's length and also as a partner. The Department of Defense did recommend some very difficult reductions in the budget submitted to us earlier this year, as they have done in previous years. And we as legislators can no longer afford to reflexively reject those recommendations because they affect a specific company, a specific region of the country, or are simply not the most politic of choices to be made. Our military is at a familiar crossroad, one they have been at before as the end of combat operations near. The additions and subtractions to defense funding made today must be carried out with an eye to the future, with a sense of the strategic impact on America's future ability to muster a force capable of successfully defending and protecting our country. In closing, I again want to reiterate my appreciation to Chairman Young for his cooperation and assistance in addressing the interests we have expressed. He and his staff have ensured that the subcommittee continues its long tradition of operating collaboratively and effectively and transparently. I am pleased that we are finally considering this bill on the floor and look forward to the debate. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Indiana reserves his time. The gentleman from Florida.
Madam Chairman, first I would like to thank Mr. Visklosky for his much more detailed description of this legislation. And I would now yield to the chairman of the full committee on appropriations, who has strongly committed to making sure that we pass all of our appropriations bills, Mr. Rogers, for 5 minutes.
Gentleman from Tennessee recognized for 5 minutes. Kentucky for 5 minutes.
Big difference. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for yielding this time. And of course, I rise in support of this, the DOD appropriations bill. The bill provides more than $512 billion in base funding for our national security and military efforts, and $85.8 billion in overseas contingency operations war funding. This is a base funding decrease of $5.1 billion below fiscal 13, but is about $28.1 billion above the current level caused by automatic sequestration spending cuts. This total reflects an appropriate, thorough analysis of what is needed to keep this country safe. Freedom isn't free. Our liberties, our rights, our property are preserved by our national defense, but at a cost. Sufficient funding for the Pentagon and our military is of the utmost importance to the continued prosperity of the United States of America. It is and should be our top priority. We've already seen the distressing toll that the heavy-handed, indiscriminate cuts of sequestration have taken on our military, from grounded planes to reduced training time to postponed maintenance, all of which contribute to the loss of readiness of our troops. And as we saw all this month, as Department of Defense civilian furloughs began, our economy is also taking a significant hit. The funding level in this bill strikes a balance between fiscal responsibility and sufficient support for our military. Within this total, we prioritize funding to advance our missions abroad, to prepare and equip our troops, and to ensure the readiness and effectiveness of our military. This includes adequate funding to purchase the equipment, weapons, and vehicles needed to keep our military protected at the ready and able to conduct successful operations. The bill also provides funding for ongoing operations and maintenance of military facilities, equipment, and bases fundamental to the successful missions of our armed forces. And essential funding is provided to develop new defense technologies, to advance the success of current military operations, and to plan for whatever new threats may arise in the future. A well-equipped military is not as effective without strong and well-prepared troops. This funding supports readiness programs that prepare our troops for both combat and peacetime missions, giving them flight time and battle training. In addition, the bill funds the authorized 1.8% pay raise for the military, above the 1% the President requested. To keep our troops healthy before and after battle, the Defense Health Program receives an increase above last year's level, funding medical facility upgrades, traumatic brain injury and psychological health research, and suicide prevention outreach. The bill also addresses what has been a black mark on our military, Madam Chairman, the problem with sexual assault. The legislation fully funds sexual assault prevention and response programs and adds $25 million in funding for sexual assault victim assistance to preserve trust in our military and ensure that members of our armed forces are not sacrificing more than they already have to serve the nation. But a balanced budget, one that does not put us into massive debt to other governments or threaten our economic stability, is also paramount to our national security. Even these critical national security programs cannot spend precious tax dollars unchecked. The bill has implemented common-sense reductions wherever possible, including rescinding unused prior year funding, nixing a proposed civilian pay raise, and saving $1 billion in anticipated excess funding. We've also prohibited funding to modify facilities in the U.S. to house Guantanamo detainees or to allow their transfer into the U.S. or its territories. When all is said and done, this bill cuts more than $5 billion below last year's enacted level, but I must emphasize that these reductions will in no way harm or negatively affect our national defense or the troops that fight to protect this great country. Madam Chairman, some will complain that the bill breaks the cap placed on defense spending under the sequester level for fiscal year 2014, put into place by the Budget Control Act. To this I say, of course it does. Mr. Chairman, I ask for an additional minute.
Yes, sure. How much?
Gentleman's recognized for an additional minute.
The gentleman, additional 2 minutes.
Gentleman's recognized for an additional 2 minutes.
Of course it does. This massive, irresponsible, dangerous reduction to defense spending under the sequestration cap is completely beyond the pale. For example, if nothing is done to cancel the next round of sequestration cuts that are scheduled to take effect when the Congress adjourns, this bill would be cut to a total of $468 billion. So, before I close, Madam Chairman, I'd like to take this time to thank the venerable chairman of this committee, of this subcommittee, Bill Young. He's a national asset, and he has shown again the skill that he has in putting together a great bill. And to Mr. Visklosky, thank you for being a great partner to our chairman throughout this process. And to the staff and the entire subcommittee members, without your hard work, we would not have this bill on the floor. I salute you and endorse this bill wholeheartedly. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Indiana.
I would yield such time as she may consume to the ranking member of the Appropriations Committee, Ms. Lowy.
Gentlelady from New York, recognized for as much time as she may consume.
Mr. Speaker, I thank Chairman Young, Ranking Member Visklosky, Chairman Rogers for working across the aisle on the bill before us today in keeping with the Defense Subcommittee's long bipartisan tradition. I also want to recognize and thank the Defense Subcommittee staff for working tirelessly on the nuts and bolts of this bill. Sadly, however, the appropriations process has become a quandary that could easily have been avoided with good old-fashioned compromise. Instead, we have disparate House and Senate allocations, House bills follow the Ryan budget, which endorses sequestration, is unrealistic, unworkable, and economically misguided, while the Senate and White House budgets are based on the higher level agreed upon in the Budget Control Act. With only 18 days of session left in the House before the end of the fiscal year, we are racing toward a government shutdown that is irresponsible. Assuming the sequester is turned off, this is a good bill. It includes additional funding and tougher penalties to address the epidemic of sexual assault plaguing our military, an increase for active duty pay by 1.8%, enhancements to embassy security by increasing the presence of Marine Corps security guards, substantial investments in health services and suicide prevention, maintenance of all the National Guard weapons of mass destruction, civil support teams, and continued support for the Israeli Cooperative Program. However, the bill also contains serious shortcomings. On July 8th, I was at Camp Smith in my district in New York, where 48 of the more than 600,000 defense civilian employees nationwide are being furloughed. Each will lose $2,706, 20% reduction to their fourth quarter earnings, on top of 3 years without a pay increase. Yet this bill does nothing to fix the pay freeze or furloughs resulting from the sequester. In fact, the majority simply ignores sequestration when it suits their purpose, including in the spending allocations for MILCON VA, Homeland Security, and defense bills, while the Republicans are steadfast in sticking to the post-sequester overall.
37, the amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on amendment number 29, printed in House Report 113-170, offered by the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cohen, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. Clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 29, printed in House Report number 113-170, offered by Mr. Cohen of Tennessee.
Recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will please rise and be counted. Sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Members are voting on an amendment offered by Representative Cohen that would cut the Afghanistan Infrastructure Fund from $279 million to $140 million. There are a number of votes in this series dealing with Afghanistan. Congressional Quarterly writes that House GOP leaders may have wanted to restrict defense appropriation bill amendments related to the National Security Agency, Syria, and Egypt, but it appears that they have declared open season on programs supporting the war in Afghanistan. The House Rules Committee made and order roughly 14 amendments to the measure that would seek to provide less funding for the Afghan Security Forces Fund and the Afghan Infrastructure Fund. Some of the Afghanistan-related amendments are focused on deficit reduction, while others seek to shift funds to other priorities. And the story says several would radically shift U.S. foreign policy priorities, making adoption unlikely. There are 9 more amendment votes left in this series.
On this vote, the yeas are 247, the nays are 173.
Mr. Gosar. Off no on aye for Mr. Gosar. Ms. Edwards. Off aye on no for Ms. Edwards. Mr. Al Green of Texas. Off no on aye for Mr. Al Green of Texas. Mr. Ruppersberger. Mr. Ruppersberger votes no.
On this vote, the yeas are 249, the nays are 173. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business on the request for recorded vote on the amendment number 30, printed in House Report 113-170, offered by the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Kaufman, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 30, printed in House Report number 113-170, offered by Mr. Kaufman of Colorado.
Recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a request for recorded vote will please rise and be counted. Sufficient number having arisen, recorded vote is ordered. Members record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
This is another one of those amendments dealing with Afghanistan. It would cut the Afghanistan Security Forces Fund $554 million to prevent the purchase of Russian helicopters. The White House says the president will veto the Pentagon spending bill if it gets to his desk. Here's what the Marine Corps Times is writing about the veto threat. A veto of the $512.5 billion defense funding bill was threatened by the White House Budget Office, not so much because of complaints about the level of defense spending, but because the Obama administration doesn't want military spending to rob money from other federal programs. The story goes on to say the White House complains the House bill is too generous with military pay, not generous enough with pay for federal civilian workers, and doesn't include administration-proposed cost-cutting measures, such as base closings and raising TRICARE health fees for military retirees. That in the Marine Corps Times.
On this vote, the yeas are 346, the nays are 79. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is a request for recorded vote on amendment number 33, printed in House Report 113-170, offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi, in which further proceedings were postponed, on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. Clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 33, printed in House Report number 113-170, offered by Mr. Garamendi of California.
Recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having arisen, recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
As amendment votes continue in the House, Congressional Quarterly writes that the National Security Agency held 4 hours worth of top-secret briefings today to lobby members of the House to continue funding its secret surveillance program. First reported by the Huffington Post, the head of the NSA, General Keith Alexander, urged lawmakers during the classified briefings to oppose an amendment to the defense bill from Representative Justin Amash from Michigan that would defund the NSA's blanket collection of telephone records. Republicans held a 2-hour briefing with Alexander at 11 a.m. Democrats followed at 1 p.m. And a senior aide for Amash told CQ Roll Call that despite the unusual lobbying effort, the lawmaker had not changed his stance. That amendment is expected to come up in the House tomorrow.
On this vote, the yeas are 150, the nays are 276. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on the amendment number 35, printed in House Report 113-170, offered by the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Fleming, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 35, printed in House Report number 113-170, offered by Mr. Fleming of Louisiana.
Recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Representative Fleming of Louisiana offered this amendment that would block funds for appointing non-faith-based chaplains. Another story about the amendment to the defense spending bill offered by Congressman Justin Amash of Michigan. A day before the House is expected to vote on restrictions to the National Security Agency's phone surveillance program, the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, told CNN today that he would be very concerned if the measure were to pass. As we mentioned in the last vote, Representative Amash's amendment would defund the NSA's collection of telephone records.
On this vote, the yeas are 253, the nays are 173. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is request for recorded vote on amendment number 36, printed in House Report 113-170, offered by the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Ridgell, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. Clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 36, printed in House Report number 113-170, offered by Mr. Ridgell of Virginia.
Recorded vote has been requested. Those in support for the request of a recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
This is the last series of amendment votes for the day. Members are expected to continue debate on the Pentagon spending bill tonight, into tomorrow, and possibly on Thursday. We'll have live coverage on C-SPAN 3 tomorrow. Transportation Secretary Anthony Fox will testify before a Senate subcommittee in the morning, live at 10 Eastern. President Obama will speak live in Galesburg, Illinois at Knox College about the economy and jobs. That's at 1 p.m. Eastern. And we'll also cover a panel from the Congressional Caucus on Black Men and Boys on the status of black males. That's at 3 p.m. Eastern, also live on C-SPAN 3.
On this vote, the yeas are 332, the nays are 94. The amendment is agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on amendment number 41, printed in House Report 113-170 by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Flores, on which further proceedings were postponed. The noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 41, printed in House Report number 113-170, offered by Mr. Flores of Texas.
Recorded vote has been requested. Those in support for request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having arisen. A recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
4 more amendment votes expected after this one. The House voting now on an amendment offered by Congressman Flores. The Senate is also working on a spending bill. They'll return tomorrow and continue work on amendments to a $54 billion government spending bill for transportation, housing, and community development programs. Senators are also expected to debate and vote on a compromise bill addressing the recent doubling of student loan interest rates. Under the agreement, senators will be allowed to debate the measure for up to 3 hours, followed by a final vote. And you can see that debate and vote on C-SPAN 2.
On this vote, the yeas are 237, the nays are 189. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is a request for recorded vote on amendment number 44, printed in House Report 113-170, offered by the gentlewoman from Connecticut, Mr. Lario, in which further proceedings were postponed, in which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 44, printed in House Report number 113-170, offered by Ms. DeLauro of Connecticut.
Recorded vote has been requested. Those in support for request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
Another amendment vote dealing with Afghanistan. This one would block funds to train the Afghan Special Missions Wing to operate certain helicopters made by Russia. After work is finished on the Pentagon spending bill, the House this week is expected to take up 2 EPA-related bills, one dealing with coal ash regulation, and another would impose new checks on regulations from the EPA. The Hill writes that the regulations bill offered by Representative Cassidy has drawn a White House veto threat. The bill would require the agency to submit a report to Congress on any energy rules that are anticipated to cost over $1 billion before they can be finalized, and allow the Energy Department to block rules that will cause significant adverse effects to the economy.
On this vote, the yeas are 333, the nays are 93. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business request for recorded vote on amendment number 45, printed in the House Report 113-170, offered by the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lee, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 45, printed in House Report number 113-170, offered by Ms. Lee of California.
Recorded vote having been requested, those supportive